My name is Anuska. Thank you so much for joining me, whether you're joining me live or you're listening to the replay. It's great to have you here. Wherever you are in the world, whatever time of day it is you're listening to this, thank you so much for being here. So I wanted to do this Facebook Live, which I've entitled Why Your Speaking Pitch Matters, because for those people who use their voice for their work, which let's face it is most of us, this is really important stuff. And so I wanted to share something really important today, which is going to help you to speak more freely, more effortlessly, and ultimately be more creative and expressive when you speak. So let's get started. Now, there's probably a reason why you're listening to this video, and I wanted to give you a few little things that you might be experiencing with your voice. And this is not an exhaustive list, so please feel free to comment or share any other experiences that you're having with your voice. I also just wanted to mention too that I'm talking here about voice issues that are non-pathological, meaning there's no sort of health-related issue or disease-related issue. And in my experience, most people's issues are not pathological. It's more that they just don't really understand how their voice works because we're never taught. And so it's more of a technical voice issue. I just wanted to say that first of all. So some of the things that you might be experiencing with your voice are things like vocal fatigue. So your voice tires really easily by the end of the day, the end of the week. If you work in a school or you work in a university, maybe at the end of a semester. You may find that you just can't rely on your voice, and so you feel like you sort of have to monitor how many speaking engagements you do or how many coaching calls or how many meetings you run. So I've definitely worked with people before that have said to me, I only sort of do my speaking engagements at a certain time of day because I don't trust my voice to really be functioning very well any other time of the day. You may find that you have to push or strain or reach your voice to get any kind of projection. So if that's you as well, that's quite common too. And you'll find out more about why that is particularly the case when I get to the pitch discussion in a bit. You may also experience frequent hoarseness and raspiness with your voice. And finally, you may struggle with being more expressive with your voice. So we call it modulating, moving the voice up and down. And you may find that your voice just is quite monotone. And I've actually had people say to me before, I just have a monotone voice. My voice just doesn't move. And so again, you're going to understand more about why that might be the case as we get further into this discussion. I wanted to start this whole conversation talking about conditioning. Now, you may not really have thought about this in terms of speaking and your pitch in terms of conditioning, but our voice is actually hugely influenced by sociocultural conditioning. And by conditioning, I mean that the speech habits that we have consciously or unconsciously created to try and fit in and be accepted within our peers, our family, our culture more broadly, our society, our colleagues at work, it could be anywhere. Now, sometimes we are aware that we are trying to fit in, and we sort of think, well, everyone else is doing this, so I probably should be doing this too. And sometimes we're not aware, and we just start creating habits that we don't even realize that we actually have created. So our speech is really conditioned in many ways, and one way in which it's very conditioned is our pitch. And by pitch, I mean how high or how low we go with our voice. So just to give you an example, in the West, generally speaking, it's considered very desirable to have a lower pitch in your voice. And whether you're male or female, it doesn't actually really matter. It's the same. And I think we're all given that sort of same conditioning around that's what a desirable voice is. And I think the messages we get are that a lower pitched voice is more attractive, is more authoritative, and is more professional. And so, of course, the opposite of that would be if you were to have a higher pitched voice, that maybe you're not taken as seriously, maybe you're seen as more immature, maybe more unprofessional. And so these are some of the things, some of the messaging we get around pitch. And some people actually have deliberately had vocal training to lower their voice. And famously, Lauren Bacall, the Hollywood actress, actually had voice coaching to lower her voice. And in fact, a vocal syndrome was named after her because of the complications it created in her voice. But also people like the British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher had vocal training to lower her voice because she wanted to sound more authoritative in what was certainly at that time a very sort of male-dominated world. Why does this matter? So you might be thinking, well, so what if I lower my pitch? Who cares? Why does this matter? Well, what happens actually is when we deliberately lower our pitch, we are actually unintentionally overcompensating and overloading our voice. And this can create some of the voice issues that I discussed at the beginning. So things like vocal strain, vocal fatigue, hoarseness, and raspiness. And so this is why it's so important that we actually learn to find what is our natural pitch to speak from, rather than sort of artificially lowering it. So our voice functions at its best when we speak from our optimal pitch, or that sort of natural pitch for us, because this is where our voice is at its most balanced and where we speak with the most comfort and the most effortlessness. So if you're someone that speaks quite low in your voice, and you may be aware that you maybe deliberately try and lower it a little bit, perhaps in certain situations, you're really throwing your voice out of balance. And so, for example, when you then try and project your voice, you're actually then having to sort of almost push your voice to be heard. And you're going to start creating strain and tension, and ultimately you're going to tire your voice out. Because actually, when you are speaking too low in your voice is not going to resonate and be as clear in that place as it would be if your voice was actually in that more natural position that it wants to be in. The other thing I just wanted to mention too is that for some people, because this is so normal to them, that they sort of have maybe a slight strain in their speaking voice, that they don't even realize that they're speaking with that strain. And then they come and see someone like myself when it becomes sort of almost unbearable. So really just try and sort of start to become a little bit more attuned with your voice, because you may find that you are straining, but perhaps you just don't really realize that you're doing it. So when we've found the optimal pitch, where our voice naturally is at its most balanced and its most comfortable, we then want to modulate the voice, meaning we move the voice up and down. And we can actually modulate across a wider range when we start from that kind of optimal pitch, and the voice will move more freely and comfortably across that range. Now, why does that matter? Well, your voice won't tire as quickly if you are speaking across a wider range than if you're just speaking in a very narrow pitch range. So if you're someone that's very monotone, your voice isn't really moving that much. So it's going to tire a lot quicker than someone that has a bit more modulation in their voice. Because what you're doing is you're spreading that sort of vocal load across a wider pitch range. And I use the analogy, as I'm going to give you a totally non-voice analogy here, of carrying shopping. Something that I like, well, I don't like the carrying bit, but I like the shopping bit. So if you had a really heavy bag of shopping and you just had it in one arm and you walked home with that, your arm is probably going to perhaps get a little bit achy, or maybe depending on how heavy the bag is, you might find that, you know, you have to stop halfway through your trip home. But if you took that same bag of shopping and split it across 3 bags, had one on your back and one in each hand, you probably won't even notice the load at all, and you'd just be able to keep walking and everything would be great. And it's the same with our voice. So we're sharing the load when we move the voice, when we modulate the voice. So your voice is going to thank you for it a lot. And certainly if you do a lot of speaking, your voice will really thank you for it. So not only will your voice function better when you speak from that optimal pitch and you modulate your voice, but it will sound better. And if you are someone that does a lot of public speaking or interviewing, presenting, training, coaching, teaching, lecturing, whatever you do, finding your sort of optimal pitch will allow you to project so much more effortlessly, so much clearer, so your audience can really understand you. It's actually a pleasure to listen to a voice that's kind of in that nice sweet spot versus a voice that's being pushed and strained, and actually even if you go higher than your optimal pitch, it's kind of got that slightly sort of squeezed, strained sound too. But in my experience, most people are below and actually lower than where they need to be. But it works the same if you're higher too. So your voice will carry more effortlessly, but also a modulated voice is just more interesting to listen to. It's more expressive. We're not just talking down here for 5 minutes or 20 minutes. And I mean, it's almost like you're bored of what you're saying. And it's very hard to actually keep listening to someone that's very monotone. So just to reiterate, what you're aiming for is to speak, find your optimal pitch. You want to find your optimal pitch, and then you want to learn to sort of modulate above and below your optimal pitch. So that doesn't mean you can't speak low, but you just don't live down there the whole time. And it really does vary from person to person what that pitch range and that pitch is, because men and women obviously have different pitch ranges. Your age will determine that too. So for example, we know that as women age, and certainly sort of post-menopause, the voice tends to drop in pitch. And as men age, the voice tends to rise in pitch. So it's going to vary depending on where you are, how old you are, what your hormones are doing. All of those things are going to have an effect on your voice pitch. But the one thing with the voice is it is small shifts make a huge difference. So normally it's not actually a massive shift in pitch that you need to make. It could be a couple of semitones. It doesn't have to be, you're not talking down here one day and then I'm talking up here the next. It's really not that drastic. It's usually quite subtle, but it actually makes a significant difference to the health, longevity, and possibilities with your voice. And I actually would argue that when you speak from that place, you can actually get a much more resonant, rich, full, authoritative voice than when you are trying to sort of unnaturally lower your voice. How do we do this? Because it's all great me telling you this is what you need to do, but how do you actually do it? Well, first of all, obviously you've got to find your optimal pitch, which, as I said, was going to vary from person to person, gender, age, etc. So the easiest way to do this is you want to work with a natural kind of uninhibited sound. And one of those sounds is like a like a, if I was to spell it, H-M-M-M, as if someone's asking you a question and you're pondering. Now, the whole idea with this is you don't want to kind of overthink this sound. You don't want to be placing the sound, forcing the sound, pushing the sound. Almost just imagine that you're not really giving it any thought. Someone asks you a question and you're like, So that's where your voice naturally wants to sit. That's that kind of midpoint of your speaking range. And so you can probably hear in my voice, I'm actually talking slightly below that pitch in the moment too. So now what you want to do is then add a little sentence after that, because obviously you can't go around just going all the time, because It's not going to get you very far. So let's just take a sentence to give you an example. So if we had, it's a beautiful day today. It's a beautiful day today. And so putting that in there first just gets your voice in that nice little sweet spot. This is where this is its happy place. And then we can start to put words after it. And then what you can do is actually start to extend that sentence. So, it's a beautiful day today. I'm going to go for a walk. So actually, funnily enough, I actually feel my voice just feels so much better up there. And hopefully you're hearing, even in what I'm doing there, more clarity in my voice. And it just feels so much nicer for me to do that. The next thing you can do is then actually start to modulate. But you need to find that spot first. So find your happy place with your voice. And we'll stick with the sentence, it's a beautiful day today. And then what I want you to do is actually start to move around. Now, with the voice, if this is a spectrum and you're sort of on the monotone end, hold on, let me get in the camera here. You're on the monotone end of the spectrum, and this is the really modulated end of the spectrum. If I just get you to go slightly, hold on, got the wrong hand here. If I get you to go slightly off the monotone, you're probably just going to go back to monotone if that's what you're used to doing. So what I tend to do with people is get them to go to the extreme. So we'll get you over here if you're normally over here, because then eventually you're more likely to find a midpoint versus the monotone. So I just want to preface this by saying this is not how I'm suggesting you speak forever. This is just a temporary tool to kind of practice this modulation. So if we take the same sentence, it's a beautiful day today. And sometimes I say to people, like, channel that sort of inner, I use the idea of a children's TV presenter because for me, they're always very over the top in their enthusiasm, probably because that's what they're told they have to do. So channel that kind of inner, overly enthusiastic TV presenter. It's a beautiful day today. And just start to get a little bit more movement in your voice. And then you can start to expand the sentence and keep that kind of very almost overly enthusiastic modulation in your voice. Now, when you've practiced that, and you can really take any sentence you like, start to lengthen the sentence, perhaps take a paragraph, see if you can keep that pitch in the same place, modulate above and below that pitch. Then the idea is you want to use modulation to actually enhance your message. So you're not just randomly raising your pitch here, there, and everywhere, but you're actually using it to really add value to what you're saying. And so if you were emphasizing a word, or if you were asking a question, or you were making a really big, bold statement, you will use that modulation of your pitch to really kind of emphasize and really add value and really to kind of give your voice more expression. As a very last thing I want to say, for people that are not used to working on their voice, you may not be able to notice much to start with on your voice. So what I suggest you do is record everything. So record a before and an after. And also what I suggest you do, because as I say, what we hear in our head is not what others hear. So sometimes we find it quite hard to actually really notice anything in our voice at all, particularly if we're not used to working with our voice, we're not massively attuned to anything to do with it. So sometimes I say to people, actually practice this in front of someone. So do a before and after in front of a friend or a partner. And I guarantee that they will hear a difference in your voice, because when I do this work in front of groups of people, the audience always hears a difference in the person I'm working with. The person I'm working with, depending on how much experience they have, may or may not notice much, because sometimes it can just get quite overwhelming to start with. So practice this in front of someone if you dare, and see what they notice in your voice. So thank you again. Thank you so much if you're listening live or on the replay, and I will see you on another video. Thank you.